Hey friends, hey, it's Lisa from Black Women Stitch and the Sitch Please podcast. Happy Black History Month. And we are making Black history together because thanks to you, the Stitch Better Have My Money fundraiser has hit 74% of our goal. That's $37,000 raised. I am beyond grateful for this community, but we are not done yet. We need $13,000 more dollars plus $5,000 for 2 more months of housing. At a time when Black history is being erased, investing in Black-led projects like Sitch Please is more important than ever. Let's stick the landing and finish strong. Donations are tax-deductible through ActBlue. Visit our website and donate today, or click the link in the show notes and donate today. Either way, help us get our stitch together and cross the finish line. Thank you. Hello, Stitchers. Welcome to Sitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black lives matter. I'm your host, Lisa Woolfork. I'm a fourth-generation sewing enthusiast with more than 20 years of sewing experience. I am looking forward to today's conversation, so sit back, relax, and get ready to get your stitch together. Hey friends, hey, it's Lisa from Black Women Stitch and the Sitch Please podcast. And as I say every week, this is a very special episode because this episode is bringing none other than Shimere Ballou. Yes, I said it, Shimere, from the Black Sewing Network and a stunning creative in her own right. Shimere is a stylist. She is a designer. She is a sewist. She is a dancer. She does all manner of things. And I am delighted to have her come and talk with us today on the Sitch Please podcast. Welcome, Shimere. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Same, girl, same. So tell us, what is your sewing story? How did you get started in sewing? How did sewing come into your life?
Yeah, so when I was 11, I asked my mom to teach me how to sew. So she had been sewing my entire life. She used to make little clothes for me and my brother. She made bridesmaid gowns. I mean, just all kind of stuff. She did like the sweatshirts where you like iron on design and like paint it in with fabric paneling. She was just a crafty person. And she had been sewing since she was very young as well. And so around 11, I was like, can you teach me how to sew? So we went to Walmart, got some materials. She basically showed me how to use the machine, and I learned on an old machine from the 70s.
Nice.
We just figured out that it was a German machine from the
Nice.
70s. So I started on a vintage machine. She taught me how to do a straight stitch, how to back stitch, and that was it. I was making like pillows and table runners and just rectangles and squares.
And so you, at 11 years old, you're like, I want to learn to sew. Your mother's like, okay, bet, I got you.
Right.
You get a machine. She has a vintage machine that's really sturdy. That's one of the great things about learning on a vintage machine.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that machine? That older machine that was all metal. What do you remember about that machine?
So I'm really big on smells. So the thing I remember most about that machine is how it smelled. I don't know. It's kind of like, you ever been to, of course you have. You go to a library and a library has a smell. You go to
Yes.
a hospital has a smell.
Yes.
A bookstore has a smell. So like those old machines have a smell. I actually have a vintage serger and it has the same smell.
Do you think it's the oil? What is it? What is it that's giving it that, like, that patina of this was made to last by people who worked with metal, not plastic? Like, what is it?
I don't know.
Because when you said
dust
bookstore,
inside of there.
yeah, the dust. Because when you said bookstore and libraries, they smell like books and paper and stories, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and so the idea of the sewing machine having a smell, no, that's really, really good. That's good. I would never have thought about that. Of all the sensory things that are involved in sewing,
yeah,
you
the
know,
smell.
the
Because I
smell
don't
is,
smell it at all with my like more modern machine. They don't have. I mean, you can smell like the oil, like you said, a little bit, but you don't. They don't have that strong smell. I don't know. I'm sure you worked on a vintage machine. You can
yeah,
probably
that is
you
so
probably
interesting. I
understand what
think
I'm saying.
it's the metal. I think it's something about the metal, the way that I think metal conducts heat
Mm-hmm.
differently than plastic. And so
Yeah.
it's gonna, you know how, like, when you work with a cast iron skillet, for example,
Right.
like that kind of stuff. The iron gets into the food, and that's a good vitamin or whatever. So, like, I can totally imagine the vintage sewing machine, and that as a child, that was something that was like, oh wait, this is different. And I love how you have that imprint as well. As like 11
Yeah.
years old, metal machine, it smells like something amazing is about to be made. So you're 11 years old, you are all team square, team rectangles. You got the
Yeah.
pillows, pillowcases, pillow covers, table runners,
Yep.
nothing round, just
Nothing wrong. I think I made something maybe like heart shaped ish. And what I would do, so I would make like pillows for my friends, and I would take like fabric paint, the puffy kind, and I would draw like their names on it or their sports numbers, or like say I played volleyball, so I would
mhm.
put like a white felt ball on it, and I would draw the volleyball lines in it.
Oh,
So a little bit of practice with circles, but it was still basically a rectangle. So we would use them for like away games when we like want to sleep on the bus and things like that. And
oh
so
my gosh. So
I had made a little business out of it.
listen, look at that. She is like, I'm making stuff for my friends, but not for free.
Not for free.
And not for free. And they are valuing it and appreciating it. So did you, after your, childhood exposure to sewing, would you imagine that your sewing story kind of went in a straight line, that you just started to do more and more and more the older you got? Or was it something that you came back to later as an adult? Did your sewing practice just grow over time
Yeah.
from childhood to teen years to adulthood?
It's definitely something I came back to. I want to say when I moved to high school, things just changed. The workload changed, priorities changed. It's all about getting to college and doing a million activities, and I'm the captain of this and the president of that. I was really like a big fish in a small pond in my school. So it just wasn't a priority anymore. I was still doing like art camps and things like that. I always
Hmm.
been into art and crafts, but I wasn't sewing anymore until after college. I was underemployed. I was really into fashion. I've always
Hmm.
been into fashion. I'm like the girl who spends my spare time putting outfits together in
Nice,
my
nice.
closet and helping others do the same. And so I wanted like these high fashion things that I was seeing in the magazines, but could not afford and so, or
Mm,
have access to, because back in the earlier 2000s, the e-commerce is not what it is today.
right,
So
right.
I mean, we were using Amazon just to buy books, really, and a few
Yes.
electronics. Now you can get the kitchen sink literally on Amazon. So
Yes,
it
and the
just
faucet
wasn't.
too. Exactly. The kitchen
It
sink and the
just
faucet, all of it.
we forget that, but it just wasn't that accessible back then. Growing up in a small town and having no money, so I picked the sewing machine back up, and my mom showed me how to use a pattern, and the rest was history from there. I started very early doing a lot of hacks, because even patterns then were not the patterns that we have access to now. They were very kind of generic, and if there was something
Mm.
trendy, it was a couple years late.
Yes, yes. It's so
So
interesting. So, what I appreciate about your story is that your mother knew that you were interested. She told you the basics. This is how you put a seam together. You start with that back stitch, lock that stitch, you sew, and then you lock it again, and you just keep doing that until you have the thing you want.
right.
You didn't necessarily start from, here is a pattern, this is how you learn to read a pattern. So what do you think the difference is in learning from measurements, like when you were just making your pillows and squares or the hearts and things that really just spoke to you and in some ways spoke to your peer group,
As an 11-year-old, right?
as an
Yeah.
11-year-old, right? And then so you do just you kind of it's kind of like you're just kind of following your creative heart, your creative vision, and then the
Hmm.
patterns come. Talk a little bit about were you able to make more with patterns because you had learned to trust yourself earlier? I don't know. I just been thinking a lot about that. I've been thinking a lot lately about patterns and how lots of Americans, we are taught to sew with patterns. And in Africa, and lots of countries in Africa, they are not using patterns. Like the first
Right.
thing they sew is, let's measure my body and put that measurement onto the paper and then onto the fabric, and then we'll have the thing, which I think is such a better way to do it. But that's not how I learned. I learned, you start with the pattern, and if you don't fit the pattern, that's just too damn bad for you, ain't it? It's just not the same. It's just not the
Yeah.
same. So talk a little bit about, like, patterns came secondary. Your
Hmm.
creativity and curiosity came first, and
Right.
patterns came second. Can you talk about how that related at all to your kind of sewing or creative journey?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like having had the previous like sewing experience before diving into the patterns and just taking the time to like perfect the straight stitch and learn the machine, I think gave me an advantage. I don't know if it necessarily shifted my perspective about what I was creating,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely spending that time just doing basic things, I think helped me in my journey because I feel like a lot of times, like you said, you get the pattern, you get the machine, and you're trying to figure it all out as you go. And it could
Yeah.
be very frustrating, like, oh, what needle do I use? Or why is my tension doing this? Or I've already worked out the kinks. I know, generally speaking, why the tension is messed up. I probably need to rethread the machine or
Mm-hmm.
adjust the tension or, just those little things like what are the sewing tools. What I did learn from the patterns that I didn't necessarily have just using, basic measurements and shapes was like
Mm-hmm.
the jargon. Like, what's a dart? What does it mean to ease stitch? Top stitch, back stitch, all of that stuff. I didn't have the jargon from, learning with just basic shapes and doing pillows and rectangles and stuff. So I think that is probably like the biggest shift was like, okay, now I'm doing more technical things and learning more
Yes.
sewing jargon per se and being able
Mm-hmm.
to kind of speak the sewing language.
I really like that because it gives you confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and when you said you have an advantage, I think that's absolutely right. When someone's like just learning to sew from scratch and they're getting all of the stuff, learn the machine, now learn the fabric stuff, now learn the pattern, now learn, it's just a lot to hold
It's
on
a
to,
lot. It's
and
a
like,
lot, but everybody wants to like they want instant gratitude, and so they like gratification style. They
yeah,
want instant gratification, so they just want to jump in and like do a project. And I'm like, if you learn how to successfully use your machine and build your confidence in those like low hanging fruit things like making a pillow, you'll just be that much better for the next project to come. But people want to run; they don't want to walk across. So
they definitely, I mean, the idea like, I want to buy a sewing machine and then I want to wear what I bought the next day. And
yeah,
I've
it's
never
like it
sewn a
just.
thing at all. Like we see a lot of this. We see a lot of it around Halloween time.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work at a fabric store, and girl, every October 28th, somebody would come to the cunny counter and show me a Vogue pattern and
Right.
say, "Is this hard? This is what I want to make." Yeah, girl, it's hard. Well, first of all, do you know how to sew? No. Then yes, this will be hard for you. Um, this will be hard. And when do you plan on wearing this? For Halloween, which is in actual 3 days. So you're gonna learn how
Yeah,
to sew and learn how to use a Vogue pattern, and you're gonna do all that in 3 days. Well, okay.
absolutely
So
not.
here's what you're gonna need. Go get some thread. Do you
I'm
have a
about to waste
sense?
money.
Yeah, listen. It's not my money. It's not my job to tell them how people how to spend their money. I'm just here to be supportive. But I love the ambition, and there's some folks
Yeah.
who just want to do that. They just want to kind of jump right in. Now you have like since this time, you have grown tremendously. Your sewing has grown, your skills have only deepened, and you have started to create garments that really speak to who you are as an adult professional person. If you had to trace your steps backward, what was one of the first things that you remember making that you wore and you were like, yes, this is what I do. This is what I love. This worked out great and I cannot wait to do the next one. Do you have a garment in your sewing history that has kind of helped you to be where you are now?
I think so. So I used to take like the bodice from like a strapless dress and it
Okay.
had princess seams, so just a basic bodice. And then I would take a pencil skirt pattern and I would mesh them together to make a
Hmm.
mini dress, I guess.
Yes, yes.
So I would shorten it to a mini length. It was strapless. And what I would do is I would take the thick Ponte fabric because I really
Yes.
liked Ponte at the time. And I would use like the center block of the bodice. I would put a wool here. So let's say like a chevron
Ooh.
wool or um, houndstooth, something like that. A
Something
menswear
textured,
inspired.
something
Yes,
textured. Because what I'm hearing with the houndstooth and the wool is it's not just a contrasting fiber. There is something very textured about wool, very organic, very textured. So
yes,
when you brought that forward, so you put that in the center front, and then
right here. Right. So, and that was the garment. And I did it a few different ways and I also sold a few. But I would say that type of garment would be like something I would define as my personal style.
mm,
And so when I try to describe my personal style, I'm like, it's feminine, but it always has like a masculine touch or
Nice.
yeah, what I like to say, a menswear touch to it. So I make a lot of blazers, and
Hmm.
I'm starting my fall collection, and I started
Yes.
off with like the wool pinstripe. So it's a
Yes.
very feminine, like bustier and miniskirt, but it's made out of this fabric that was traditionally used for menswear. And now
Yes.
everybody wears everything. But
Right,
if you
right.
get what I'm saying, thinking about the history of
Yes.
fashion.
Yes,
And so
yes.
that's why I would buy those textiles, and then I would make pretty dresses out of them. And
Okay.
so anytime I see like an inspired collection that's like women's wear but menswear inspired, I'm like all over it. Like taking a nice structured blouse and adding a feminine detail to it. So
Yes.
I would say that was probably one of the first dresses that I was able to make because I had the skills. It's not something you could buy in the store, but it was like totally me. And like if I could define my personal style in like one of my early pieces, that would be it.
I really appreciate that because the way that we can break down this binary between masculine and feminine, like we all recognize these as social constructs, and that you're able to kind of put these things together in such a way that adds additional visual interest. I think that that is a lot of fun. Now, do
Yeah.
you have a particular season? And I know that the fall collection is something that is ongoing currently. But is fall your favorite season? What's your favorite season to sew for? Is it fall? Is it spring, winter, summer? Do you have a favorite season? And if so, what is your favorite piece for that season? Hey, friends. Hey, I know you're enjoying the audio version of Stitch Please, and thanks so much for listening. But you're missing out on all the great stuff going on behind the scenes. That's why I'm inviting you to join our Black Women Stitch Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can see all the video versions of the podcast. Plus, you get some amazing swatch cards. You know how much I love these swatch cards. Look, see how cool these are? I Oh wait, you can't see them because you are not yet on the Patreon. So when you join the Patreon, you'll be able to see this, me showing you these amazing cards. We also have some great perks at the other tiers, like discounts, swag, office hours, and more. Don't be the last sewist in the group now. Head over to patreon.com/blackwomenstitch or click the link in the show notes and become a Patreon supporter today. We truly cannot do this without you. So thank you so much.
So my favorite fashion season is certainly fall because I love to layer and I love, like I said, the jackets, the trench coats, the blazers, the textured fabrics, the heavy
Yes,
fabrics.
yes.
I thrive there. And I get giddy. I buy it all year round. Like, all right, I'm over summer. When are we starting fall? I'm
I'm
over
tired
it.
of sweating.
I'm
I'd
like,
like.
I'm about to make y'all hot with this wool, but this is what I'm ready to do. I'm ready to make sweaters and stuff. So fall for sure. Um, that's just what resonates with me. I'm actually a winter baby, but I like fall. Winter is a little too cold for me. So I would say my
Mhm.
favorite pieces would be anything made out of wool. So like those bustiers, the mini skirts, the blazers. And blazers are like a little sweet and sour for me. They're like the one thing that I really want to get good at, like I really want to get good at making custom tailored looking garments, but they're also
Yes.
like very difficult and very layered. And the more advanced you get, the more time and effort and hand stitching. So it's like one of those things that I'm like always trying to get better at, but I'm always like, oh, it gives me anxiety just thinking about it.
But what I appreciate about what you're describing here is just like when you were 11, you started at one level with one thing, and then you incorporated patterns, and now that you are starting to mature more in your style and in your sewing, you're saying, I would like my results, I would like the outcome of my sewing to be at a higher level. And because of that, I know that some of the things that I've learned, for example, like using a serger or an overlocker machine, you're not going to do that. Can you share with us your opinion about the blind hem stitch on the sewing machine? Because I very much remember, I don't know if I would call it a diatribe, Shimere, but it was not a diatribe. Because girl, you was getting in these people's feelings about using the blind hem foot. I was like, if you could do a blind hem foot good, brava. And Shamir's like, you better take that raggedy blind hem foot and tell somebody else about it because what I'm doing over here is hand hemming. Tell us a little bit about that. Why was that detail important to you? Why choose to blind hem by hand versus machine?
Well, I'm a little biased, so you have to remember I started with the machine from the 70s. There were no blind hems. So I did all of my hemming by hand, or if I did it on a machine, it was a straight stitch or maybe a zigzag for a knit. But if you wanted a really clean finish, you were finishing it by hand. And so I just kind of came accustomed to that look of just having a clean, ooh, it's stormy here, a clean hem without the little like nicks in it that you get from the machine. So I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just saying if you want to level up, learn how to hand stitch.
Hey,
Learn how to
listen,
hand
you
stitch.
heard it here
Mhm.
first, y'all. That was Shamir's fighting words, not mine. She's like, look, y'all can stay in your struggle with your nicked up hymns, but
Right.
not over here. Not over here. Now, I love to talk about this in the piece that you have behind you right now. This is a gorgeous dress. Can you and it feels very much like one of the fall pieces that you described. Can you talk about this dress and how this reflects your love of fall sewing and how this kind of reflects your overall style?
Sure. So it is, a shirt dress, which we have a nice tailored shirt, a big collar, which is very masculine. It also has this like flange detail on it, which to me is a bit more masculine. It gives like a strong
A
shoulder vibe,
shoulder, yeah.
which is, a more masculine figure, if
Silhouette,
you
yeah.
will. But it is a dress. It does have this beautiful like fall motif print on it. It has these nice flowers and colors. And so it is kind of like a nice mashup. And then I have this belt here. I just have it here for now, but it has not gross grain, wood grain on it. So bringing in another element of nature, but it's also like, hard wood paired with like this
Hmm.
shiny metallic gold. So for me,
Yes.
it's always about juxtaposition. Like for my Atlanta Frocktails look, a lot of people didn't get it, but I had this structured black side of my dress, which brought in like I keep talking about that kind of like masculine
Yes.
energy or feel to the garment, very like suit like. And then on the other side, I had the very feminine, flowy chiffon floral going on the other side. And it's just, I'm always looking for ways to kind of marry that. So you'll see that over and
Yes.
over, whether it's like color choice or structure choice, pattern choice, in nearly all of my garments. You will probably never see me in just a really frilly dress, or you know what I mean? It's just always going to have some balance to it, if you will.
I love the word juxtaposition that you use because I think a lot of things that do spike for me at least, that spike my visual interest are contrasts. Like when you were talking earlier about when you did your first bodice that you really kind of fell in love with and you put houndstooth or wool right there in the center, which is very unexpected
Right.
for a bustier type top. You wouldn't expect wool, you would not expect houndstooth. But to have that, it's just like, wow, it's inspiring and it's sparking my curiosity. Now,
Yeah.
when you go to do a collection, do you have a number of pieces in mind? And if so, what are they? Is it like, okay, I'm going to do 5 pieces, I'm going to mix up trousers and skirts and pants and dresses? Are there a lot of interchangeability involved? Do you imagine it as a capsule where you can kind of switch things out within the collection as well as drawing on pieces from previous ones? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I would say it's more me like trying to create pieces that could be interchanged with one another, but also it's simple enough that other pieces in my collection can be pulled into it. So it's not just, just one collection. Nothing can be worn with anything else. It's so odd from everything else that I have in my closet.
Okay.
This fall collection that I'm working on started with the fabric actually. So for some reason, I just keep picking up this terracotta colored fabric. Like I've been collecting it over like the last like year and a half. So I've been picking it up at fabric swaps. Friends have been giving it to me. I've been grabbing it at the fabric store. So it was just piling up. And so I was like, you know what? I think I have a collection here. And so I started with the fabrics. What patterns do I have that would match well with these fabrics? What are some of the things that I bought these fabrics for that never got around
Mm,
to? And then how can we like make sure that they work with one another? So it's not just a piece that I can't really do anything else with. It's a shirt and pants, and this can go with that, and I can wear this jacket, and this top will go with that, and I can wear it to work. I can wear it to the club. I can wear it to date night. So those are
right.
the ways that I was kind of thinking about the collection. Like I wanted to be multifaceted, but I also wanted to de-stash. So everything in the collection I'm using right now is stuff that I already had in my fabric stash.
I appreciate this very much, starting with the fabric, using what you have. So, in some ways, it's almost like built in sustainability. You're
Yeah,
relying on the fabric you already had. And when you create your pieces, you are creating them so that they can kind of reference backward to things you've already have, as well as the things you're making now and for the future. And I think that's the
right.
difference, right, between fashion and style. Well, tell us your opinion on that. I know what I think, but what do you think? What is the, for you, what is the relationship between fashion and style?
I think fashion is that thing that always changes. I don't want to necessarily say it's trends. I think that's a little too quick, but in terms of cycling. But I think fashion is just kind of like what you see on the mannequin. This can be fashion. It's the garments, it's the pieces. Those are fashions, right?
Okay.
But I think of style as like how do you take the fashions and make them work for you? When you put them on, what are you conveying to the world? Because I look at style as a way to communicate who you are, what you're about, maybe what you're feeling. And that's certainly the way I dress. If I'm feeling saucy, I might have a mini skirt on. If I'm feeling like business, I'm putting on my blazer. So that's the kind of way I look at style versus fashion. The fashion is kind of like the pieces, and then trends is like what pieces are trending or everybody's wearing. So I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people think about fashion as trends, but I don't think I think those are two separate things. But style is what you do with the pieces, what you do with the fashion. So, in my opinion,
I think that's a great answer. I utterly agree with that. And the way that I love style as well is that once you develop your personal style, it is consistent.
right?
And it's consistent not because it's always the same, but as you grow personally, your style also can grow. It's a lot of it's going to be the same. Like for me, I'm able to kind of go back and say, there's a reason that like almost all of my shoes match or coordinate with almost all of my outfits. That the style that I have is something that's bright and cheerful, and that's just kind of like who I am and what I enjoy doing. So I know if I buy these hot pink Marimekko Adidas shoes, they are going to match about 6 different outfits
Yeah.
easily. And that's because of the style question. Now, I cannot believe this, believe it or not, but we are getting near to the end of our time, and I get to ask you the
Oh,
question. I know, right? So, see, you was nervous for nothing. Now you got to come
I
back.
know.
Now you got to come back.
Gotta
Well,
come back.
we gotta come back. That's just all. That's all there is to it. But I definitely have to ask you the question I ask everybody. The slogan of the Stitch Please podcast is that we will help you get your stitch together. Shimere, the Me Made Style Maven, how would you advise us to help us get our stitch together?
I'm gonna be real basic. I'm gonna say iron your garments as you go.
Iron your garments
Say iron
as you go. Okay, say more
iron
about
as you
this.
go. I'm old school again, so YouTube University, it might not teach you this all the time. Listen, every seam you stitch, iron it. There's no reason for us to spend all this time, effort, and money making these beautiful garments, and they're misshapen. They look like you pulled them out the the bargain bin because you didn't iron. Ironing will change so much about your garment. It will just elevate your garment so much. People are like, how do I make my garments not look homemade? Start with the iron. Start with the iron. People, I make a lot of like, I think simple garments. I do hack and like have some fun, but a lot of the stuff I make is basics. It's more fabric choice and styling.
Mm.
If I would say, in my personal opinion. Besides like the frock tails and things like that, I'm a basics girl. I like to mix and match my things. But the things that I think that I'm celebrated for and that set me apart, is how like professional the garments look. And that is just
Hmm.
because I iron. I don't do anything particularly special. I don't have a fancy machine. My machine costs about $300. It's very basic. There's no magic here. It is the iron.
Wow. And on that note, that's the truth, Ruth. The difference between a handmade garment and a homemade garment is pressing every seam as you go. All right,
Everything.
listen, you heard it here first, friend. Listen, this not me. This is advice from Shimere. I just happen to utterly agree with it. But yes, thank you so much, Shimere. Tell us where we can
Yes.
find you in these internet streets so we can follow you and celebrate you.
Sure, you can follow me on Instagram. It's my first name spelled backwards, EREMIHS dot sew, dot creative, and you can find me on TikTok at shim_sews.
Thank you so much, Shimere Ballou. This has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak with us.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Sitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. We appreciate you joining us this week and every week for stories that center Black women, girls, and femmes in sewing. We invite you to join the Black Women Stitch Patreon community with giving levels beginning at $5 a month. Your contributions help us bring the Sitch Please podcast to you every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. And come back next week and we'll help you get your stitch together.